Priorities. When you look at a project car, a good place to start is probably just giving it a good wash. This thing's pretty messy, inside and out. I haven't polished the paint since I put it on, and the trim looks bad. My windshield is broken. My Toyota Corolla is having some serious undiagnosed issues. And my wheels look horrible. I guess that makes priority number 1 my brakes. But not just any brakes. Carbon ceramic pads with drilled and slotted rotors to manage heat better when I drive my race car. I got them on Black Friday, and they were barely more than the OEM brakes, so they were an easy expense to justify to my wife. So this just turned into how to change your brakes. Step 1, get the car into the air. Once it's in the air, test fit a bunch of different sockets to know which size is actually the right size. If the wheel is not coming off, just hit it and it should pop off. Hashtag not a baby. There is some stuff you'll need.
Screwdriver. PB Blaster. A big header.
This is my old rotor and my old pads. You're not going to be able to see that it's slightly warped from overheating, but it is. Step 1 is take off those 2 screws on the front. These never come out easy, but these ones did. Hopefully the other side is just as good. Once you get those screws out, it's just a matter of removing the caliper. It'll be pretty obvious that there are 2 bolts holding on the caliper. Once you get those bolts unscrewed, just set the caliper somewhere out of the way. It barely doesn't reach the ground, so I rested it on the control arm. If you're having a hard time getting a bolt off, try a longer handle. If you're having a hard time getting the bolt off again, try an even longer handle. It should work great. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to find a convenient place for it. Suspension parts are torqued really high, so be prepared to fight them to come off. Just make sure that you're pulling or pushing the right direction, or else you might get the bolt off in an entirely unexpected way. Once you get the bracket off, the rotor should just pop right off, and if it doesn't, that's what the is for. Now for the other side. Same thing. I try the screws. Now this is what I was expecting. This is what you really prepare PB Blaster and the big hammer for. The impact loosens it up, and the PB Blaster soaks in deep. That combined with a little bit of heat gun, it also can help to beat the screwdriver into the hole a little bit, make sure it fits nice and tight so that it doesn't cam out. But I think I'm just going to leave that problem for later. So these are my new fancy rotors. Here's a comparison of the new rotors versus the old ones. They're also labeled for which side they go on, because the directions of those lines will matter if it's on the passenger or the driver's side. So I've laid them out so that I can remember which side is which. Most importantly, they're just much better looking than the old pads, and they manage heat better when you stop from a high speed. You can see the new pads are much thicker, and the old pads had a tiny bit of life left, but I was about at a good time to change them. The first thing you do is take off the stickers that label which side they are. Then you decide that that's too difficult, so you just leave them. Spray them with brake clean, and that helps get off some of the oil that they leave on when they ship them to you. Then, make sure you open your garage door just slightly so that you don't get high. Now take the grossest brush you can find and make sure that the wheel hub is nice and clean. Then do the same thing, spray it off with brake clean, just to kind of get the dust off. Take your old caliper bracket and pop out these 2 metal clips. take that same nasty brush and scrape those surfaces nice and smooth. Get it clean because you're going to be replacing those guys. Then take your fancy new guides and insert them into the bracket. Fancy. Man, that looks much better. That's lame. You need to spread lubricant on these. I don't recommend using a Q-tip for this. A Q-tip will leave little bits of cotton all over the pads. So the first thing you need to do is take a Q-tip and then spread it all over the back. Then you just pop those guys right into the bracket so that the pad can slide back and forth easily. And then put on these return springs. Make sure that when you put on the new rotor, you know the difference between the driver's side and the passenger side, which I apparently don't. Now, using the power of editing, I'm just going to switch that right over. In case you're doing this exact car, the bracket is torqued on with 80 foot-pounds. Look up the torque specs for whatever car you're dealing with. Now it's time to revisit the other side. The caliper and the bracket come off easy, but the rotor is still stuck. PB Blaster has been sitting for a while, so I have an idea. An idea so genius that it took me about an hour to even think of it, even though I hinted at it at the very beginning, and I've done this like 10 times. That idea is a... Surprisingly, after that it pops right out. See kids, there's a lot of value in putting off your problems and just letting them sit. And that's the lesson. You learn when you work on cars that the longer you ignore a problem, the less of a problem it becomes. And that's just a good lesson for life. Also, I recommend getting new screws for mounting up your rotors just to save you problems next time you change your brakes. So I'm just going to reuse my old screws. Now, I didn't show you this on the other side, but they make a little expander for your piston. It helps to expand the caliper and push it back in to make space for your new pads. I have no idea what it's called, so there is no link in the description below. But if it's not working, you can just shove a brake pad in there and use pretty much anything to push that back. You just don't want to go really, really fast. You'll monkey with it a lot, but the point is just to get the piston flush. Once you're done, put the caliper back out of the way until you can get the rotor back on. Put the bracket back on. This is probably a better place to put on those return springs. Then just slip the caliper over the pads, torque the caliper back into the guide pins, and your brake job is basically done. Now just put the wheels back on. Wow. These brakes look so much better. I really feel like I solved a major problem with this car, and I'm glad that I'm tackling my priorities in order. Now there is a break-in sequence for these. You have to go from 40 miles an hour down to 10 5 times as quick as you can in succession. Then do the same thing from 35 down to 5 times. Oh, you hear that sound? If you're curious what that sound is, that's the sound of forgetting to torque down your wheels. So here's your daily reminder to torque down your wheels. If you ever hear that sound in your own car, it will give you a heart attack because you'll think you broke your car and that you broke your car putting on the brakes. So the next step in bedding your brakes is to just back up, back to your house, torque on your wheels, and once that's done, you start the actual brake bedding process. The point is to get them hot in a controlled environment, then cool them down slightly, and not create any spots on the rotors that become hot spots down the road. That can cause warpage. It's more important on performance brakes like these, but it's still not a bad idea to try to bed your brakes a little bit before you drive very long. Look up the specific sequence for whatever brakes you get. It's pretty crazy to bed your brakes because at the beginning they were fairly soft and at the end it stopped much, much harder, and it's very smooth braking. So that's how you change your brakes. It's pretty straightforward. If you do what I say and it doesn't work, it's not my fault. Make sure to watch more than one video so that you can blame the other guy when it doesn't work. Thanks for watching. Also, sorry for no video last week. I was traveling for work again.
Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. Hey, while you're here, try another one. Please. Please. Please.